Welcome to Hampton Bay Stories. Please like this story. We invite you to subscribe to our channel or explore our books on your preferred online book retailer. This story is called Between Two Worlds. Prologue, Hampton Bay, present day. The second unit of the duplex had been empty since he bought the property. Takao had left it mostly alone, using it for storage and projects he never finished. But now Jay and his daughters were moving in, and the house was about to feel full for the first time. Takao liked that idea. He had lived with Chance and Taylor off and on for 3 years. He and Chance were like brothers. They shared a French heritage, but Takao had never shared this fact with Chance. After his friend Rich got married, Taka realized it was time to settle down, but he needed a stable job and a home. While the duplex was not his forever home, it would provide the leverage he would need to purchase a home. He bought the duplex at an auction. It was worth 3 times what he paid for it. However, to carry a mortgage, he would have to find additional funding for the non-profit organization he had founded. It was late morning, and the breeze from the bay drifted in through the open window, carrying a warm, fragrant air. It was the smell of the first blossoms of late spring. His friend Jay and his daughters were moving in. The twins, Emma and Bella, were playing in the backyard, their laughter skipping like stones across the walls. Jay was sorting boxes on the porch. Takao was alone in the back room. He knelt beside a stack of bins he hadn't touched in years. He opened one marked TJ, personal, and smiled at the handwriting. It was his from another lifetime. A few layers down, he found an old navy backpack that was scuffed canvas and had a bent zipper. He pulled it out and sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, fingers tracing the seams like he was greeting an old friend. Inside, buried beneath a rolled-up comic and a flashlight that would never turn on again, was a small box. He blinked, then laughed softly. No way. Then he shook his head. He opened it and counted the bills, 10 crisp $100 notes, untouched by time. Thanks, Ma, he whispered. He'd forgotten all about it. After he moved in with Uncle Nance in Japan, money had never been an issue again. But back then in Oakland, not far from the shipyards, money was tight all the time. Money had been everything. He was about to close the box when he noticed the yellowing paper that had been beneath the envelope. It folded once and then again was the map. He knew it before he opened it. Drawn in pencil on an old sheet of school notebook paper, it showed the streets just east of the shipyards. Familiar names. Back alleys. A stretch of wild green near the edge of the hills. One path wound toward a spot marked by a small, deliberate X. Takao stared at it, breath caught in his chest. He remembered. He had planned to follow that map the day it was packed in his emergency kit. His mother had left it for him, not just the cash and papers, but this map, drawn by her hand, guiding him toward something. Maybe a hiding place. Maybe a truth. But before he could go, they came. Child Protective Services. He remembered the knock, the voices, the smell of the van, the cold click of the door closing behind him. The map had waited in silence ever since until now. Takao put the backpack in his bedroom. Then he went to help Jay unpack the van. Later that night, he lay back against his pillows, holding the map. His mother had not said much about his father or their relationship. She just shared photos of Takao playing with his dad, hiking with his dad sitting on his shoulders. Still, he heard the quiet whispers of his neighbors. He was only 3 when it happened. All he remembered was sitting in the hospital with Cressida, his mother's friend. When his mother, Nora, was released, she never looked the same, and they never saw his father again. He closed his eyes and ruminated on the tragedy that was his parents' relationship. Pacific Heights, decades earlier. The rooftop veranda shimmered under strings of gold-tinted lights, suspended like fake stars above polished stone and moneyed ambition. Laughter drifted from the ballroom, heavy with champagne and secrets. Nora stood alone at the edge of it all, arms resting on the railing, looking past the skyline. She was far from home, but she had not forgotten who she was. 6 feet tall, strikingly dark-skinned, and built like a goddess from old poetry, Nora James did not blend into the background. Her body was slender, but full in the places that held weight and called for attention. She wore a deep purple dress with a sweetheart neckline. Her hair fell against her shoulders in a cascade of curls. Nora felt exposed. She had just arrived at the Joel Davis agency 3 weeks ago, and already, the signs were showing that something was amiss. So far, there have been no photo shoots, no runways, no makeup trials, no branding meetings. Just designer parties with businessmen and Joel's silent nods when someone rich pointed at certain females. The girls came and went weekly. Nora would barely get a chance to know their names, and they would disappear. Joel claimed they were off on assignments. That evening, Joel had whispered in her ear, "Smile, be polite, listen more than you talk. Mateo paid to meet you." She had smiled, but only with her lips. Nora was new to the industry, but she was sure that talent agents did not pay to meet models. The problem for Nora was that she had signed a contract. She could not work at any other agency or sign with another agent for 3 years. Now she was here alone again, pretending to enjoy the view. Across the room in the shadows, Norihiko watched her. His dark suit blended into the night, but his gaze did not. He was lean, with the posture of someone who had learned to move quietly through dangerous rooms. Next to him, his friend Hiro leaned back with his drink. "You are wasting your time," Hiro said, nodding toward Nora. "She is not for you." That is Nora James, Joel's latest import. I heard she finished college in Boston. She is fluent in French and she is smart, which is always dangerous in this industry. He is trying to sell her to one of those European clients. Norihiko said nothing. He should have been used to it. His boss started him out driving vans of trafficked humans. These were often average females from small towns or villages. This woman was a goddess. Joel Davis was a fool. He did not even recognize the treasure he had. Norihiko tracked Nora's every movement. He had money saved. He could afford the transaction, but Mateo's transaction was in play. Moments later, Joel returned to the veranda, dragging along a thick-set man in his 50s with skin like a wrinkled paper bag and eyes that gleamed like coins. He walked directly to Nora, introduced them, then gave the man a smile and placed his hand on her shoulder before slipping away. The man talked fast and low. Nora listened, tight-lipped, nodding but never softening. When he reached for her back, trying to guide her toward the stairs, she froze. He leaned in and said something close to her ear. She pulled away. He insisted. Norihiko stood up. The man motioned, and from the shadows, 2 bulky men began to approach. They took her by both arms and forced her outside. They were Mateo's security, but not the official kind. Norihiko was already moving. Outside, near the valet stand, Nora stood with her arms crossed. "I said no," she repeated. Mateo's smile had vanished. "I paid for you. You are my property," he shouted. Norihiko's voice broke the silence. She said no. The 2 men turned simultaneously as one. The first landed a punch square on Norihiko's jaw. He stumbled back, dazed, lips split. Nora's heel turned. She moved like a tornado. Her foot slammed into the first man's ribs. He crashed into the rose bushes, screaming as thorns dug into his flesh. The second man rushed her. She twisted into a perfect roundhouse kick, catching him across the face. His nose snapped. Blood poured. Norihiko was on the ground, stunned but conscious. She knelt beside him. Joel came running out, red-faced and furious. "What the hell did you do?" "I'm not your property," she said. "You're fired, is what you are," he snapped. She did not argue. She stood up, went inside, and returned minutes later with a small clutch. Her overnight bag was already packed. She wasn't sure she wanted to stay. She walked down the street, heels echoing on the pavement. Norihiko, wincing, slid into his car and followed her slowly. When he rolled down the window, his voice was calm. "There are no buses this late." She stopped walking. Her eyes studied him for a long moment. Then she opened the passenger door and got in. "You must be hungry." They did not have any real food. "That Joel is a cheap son of AB**. Nora nodded, and Norihiko turned his luxury sports car and headed to Chinatown. Shirori was a Japanese restaurant tucked behind a row of neon shops in a quiet corner of the city. The door slid open with a soft whisper of wood and paper. Inside, the world fell into candlelight, lacquered wood, and gentle flute music. They were seated near a wall of rice paper, surrounded by stillness. Nora sat quietly for a moment, fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. He poured them each a small glass of plum wine. "Ameshu," he said. "It is plum wine. I think you will like it." "Sweet," she said after tasting it, licking the corner of her lip. "Strong, but gentle. Like you." He blinked at that. She smiled, the first real one he had seen. "You saved me," she added. He shook his head. "You saved yourself and me," he said with a chuckle. "What is your name?" she asked. "Nori," he replied. "Come on." "It is true. My name is Norihiko, but here in the US they call me Nori." Nori and Nora. "That sounds nice," she said. "It sounds like we were meant to be," Nori replied. The waitress brought out a small tray holding grilled eel, pickled daikon, sticky rice, sesame noodles, and delicate pieces of tamagoyaki. Norihiko picked up a small roll of sticky rice wrapped in seaweed, dipped it gently, and held it out to her. She leaned forward and took the roll into her mouth slowly. Her lips brushed his fingers. Her eyes never left his. Then, just as softly, she sucked the tip of his finger before pulling away. Norihiko swallowed hard. That silence between them was not empty. It was charged. He picked up a piece of pickled cucumber and brought it to her lips. She leaned in, let him feed her again. "You're from Boston?" he asked. "Hyde Park. My grandfather came from Haiti. He taught me to keep my back straight and never trust men who smile too quickly." Nori had to smile at that one. "How did you get here?" "I attended Boston University. French literature. I had a mountain of student loan debt." "Is that why you chose modeling?" "Yes and no, I needed a job. A guy approached me in the mall and asked me if I wanted to model. I did catalogs during college, but I wanted to make more money faster. He introduced me to Joel. He paid for my airfare, gave me an advance to rent a place." "How much?" Nori was afraid to ask. This is how girls got trapped. $10,000, I used part of it to catch up on my student loans, and the rest I saved for housing. It is not cheap here. "Do you like modeling?" "I did it first, but this," she shook her head, "it is something else." She looked into his eyes and whispered, "I think it is human trafficking." He nodded and took a drink of his wine. He knew he needed to warn her that she should return to Boston as soon as possible, but he wanted her. She took another sip of wine. Her eyes softened. The tension in her shoulders eased. "Do you live nearby?" he asked. She nodded. "May I drive you?" "Are you sane?" she asked. "Completely," he replied. He paid the bill, left a tip, and placed his hand on her back as they left the restaurant. When they reached her home, Nori got out, opened her door, and walked her to the door. The door of the duplex clicked open. Nora stepped inside first, flipping a small switch. The hallway lit up in warm tones of ivory and coral. A wall was lined with photographs in simple frames, old black and white images of Boston winters, family reunions, and a little girl in braids holding a library book with pride. Norihiko followed with 2 bags in hand, one with plum wine and sticky Japanese desserts, the other with their leftovers from Shirori. He walked slowly, deliberately, each step measured, his eyes scanning the walls, then her hips. She kicked off her heels at the entryway and stretched her long arms above her head, her back arching slightly, the muscles of her calves and thighs flexing. He tried not to stare, but he did. There was nothing like Nora in Japan. She was the epitome of female pulchritude, and she was 100% real. "Do you want coffee, tea, or wine?" she asked, already heading down the hall toward what must have been her bedroom. He cleared his throat. "I brought more wine," he said, holding up the bag, "and something sweet." She nodded without looking back. "The kitchen's that way," she said, her voice light. "I need to get out of this ridiculous dress." He watched her disappear into the back of the house, the sound of the bathroom door closing behind her, followed by the faint hiss of a shower. For a moment, he stood still. Then he moved. The kitchen was cozy, full of color. A hanging pothose plant spilled from a shelf. Mismatched dishes were stacked neatly beside a fruit bowl. The scent of hibiscus drifted through the open window above the sink. He found a simple linen tablecloth in a drawer and spread it across the small table, setting down the wine and dessert. He placed 2 glasses, one elegant and one mismatched, and found a few of the hibiscus blossoms in a vase by the window. He pulled a few blooms and scattered them around the table, not perfectly, but purposefully. When she returned, his breath caught in his throat. She wore a loose pastel tank dress that clung to her like light silk. The fabric was soft pink and ivory with splashes of watercolor blue. The sides of the dress were open under her arms, revealing glimpses of her body. Her legs, long and bare, were the kind that haunted men in silence. Her skin still shimmered faintly from the body oil she applied, and her scent had changed. It was pikake, jasmine from the islands. He swallowed. "You did all this?" she asked, glancing at the table, half smiling. "That's kind of sweet." He pulled out a chair for her. "Please." As she lowered herself into the seat, he leaned in, not touching her, not quite, but brushing his cheek lightly against her hair. The texture surprised him. Soft, delicate, like spring cotton. "I love your hair," he murmured, unthinking. She blinked and looked at him, confused at first, then quietly pleased. "Most people don't say that. They just ask if they can touch it." "I don't want to touch it," he said. "I just wanted to tell you." She held his gaze for a long moment. Something loosened in her face. A wall dropped, not all the way, but far enough to let him in. He sat closer now, just inches away. He lifted a piece of wagashi, a sticky sweet bean paste wrapped in a thin layer of mochi, and held it to her lips. She took it delicately between her teeth. The syrup smeared on his finger. Before he could pull away, she leaned in and sucked his finger clean, slow, and warm. He inhaled sharply. She smiled. "You really like feeding me," she said. "I really like watching you eat," he replied. He poured more plum wine into both their glasses. She took a sip, then closed her eyes for just a second. The tension had nearly left her shoulders now. Her breath slowed. Then, softly, without a word, he reached out and drew her into his lap. She let him. One leg draped over his thigh. Her arms circled his neck. Her lips were so close he could feel the breath between each word. "You are dangerous," she whispered. "So are you," he replied. Then he kissed her. The wine on her lips. The scent of jasmine on her neck. Her body, warm and open in his arms. This wasn't business. This wasn't a conquest. This was gravity. And he was falling hard. Nora's breath was warm on his cheek. The sweet perfume of pikake still clung to her skin. Her eyes searched his, half-lidded, her body swaying gently to the rhythm of her desire and his touch. "Have you ever dated a Japanese man?" he asked, his voice a whisper against her lips. She smiled. "Not many in Boston where I lived." He smiled at the comment, but there was something tender behind it. "To be honest," she added, brushing her fingers along the collar of his shirt, "my father was strict. I lived at home until the modeling contract came through. He told me not to go. He was angry. He thought it was a trap. Was he right?" She didn't answer right away. Then she looked away and nodded, embarrassed by the admission. He leaned in, nuzzled the smooth curve of her neck, and kissed it. Then he opened his mouth and began to nibble gently, just under her ear. "Yes," she sighed. That was all he needed. He stood, lifting her easily, her legs locking around his waist, her arms wrapped around his shoulders. The world fell away behind them as he carried her to her bedroom, kissing her with growing intensity. They played, explored, whispered secrets between long kisses. They found places on each other's bodies no one else had ever touched. Eventually, they slept. When morning broke through the blinds, Nora stirred beneath soft sheets. The smell of grilled fish and steamed rice filled the air. She blinked against the sunlight. Then she smiled. Norihiko returned with a tray. On it were bowls of warm miso soup, pickled cucumber, grilled mackerel, rolled omelets, and perfectly shaped rice balls. A little orchid lay beside the dishes, plucked from her windowsill. "You cooked," she said sleepily. "For you," he said, placing the tray on the bed. She stretched lazily, arching her back. "I need a shower." "No," he said, staring at her, his voice low. "I love you natural." She looked at him carefully, blinking once and cocking her head. He had said it. "I love you," he repeated. "I know it's too soon. I know we just met. But I mean it. I feel it." She said nothing at first, but she took his hand, kissed his fingers, and pulled him toward her. They ate between kisses. They laughed, fed each other, and touched constantly. Then he kissed her neck again and lay her down. He showed her things she had never done before. He was patient, precise, and gentle, but never shy. She trusted him. She gave him everything. When daylight crept to the windows again, and they were tangled in the sheets, his phone chirped on the nightstand. He hesitated before reaching for it. He saw Hiro's name and closed his eyes. The message was short. "The boss wants to see you. Today. Come now." Nora was sleeping, her arm draped over his chest. He turned and looked at her, his heart twisting with something unfamiliar. Fear. He got up quietly, dressed without a sound, and before he left, he placed a single flower on the pillow beside her head. He did not leave a note. He closed the door behind him. She woke up to silence. No footsteps. No scent of breakfast. No voice calling her name. She turned over and saw the flower. A single, perfect bloom of hibiscus. She sat up slowly, pulling the sheet to her chest, looking around. She waited. And waited. But he did not return. The light had changed. The air in the apartment felt still like a place between lives. Nora sat on the edge of the bed, holding a small plastic test in her hand. She had taken 3. All said the same thing. Positive. She stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her hand rested on her belly. Her body was silent. There was no assault, no cramping, no monthly revolt that always seized her with clenched muscles and aches as her womb flushed out the unused tissue, the carefully crafted nest her body built month after month. That routine pain, that sharp reminder that she had not created life, was absent. Her body had stopped its rebellion. It did not churn. It did not bleed. It was calm now, quiet and purposeful. It had made a nest, and for the first time, it was not wasted. It had done what it was designed to do. This was not just biology. It was female nature. It was the wordless realization that she had fulfilled her purpose. And with that understanding, a strange peace settled over her. She had not seen Norihiko since that morning. She did not know his last name. She did not have a number. Joel had blacklisted her from the agency. Her father refused to speak to her, and her mother, quietly ashamed, had sent a few $100s in a birthday card. It was not enough. Rent in Oakland was high. Her signing bonus was gone. She was alone. She had walked to the clinic last week. She had stared at the forms. She had felt the tension in her throat when they explained the options. But when she thought of Nori, the way he had touched her, the way he had said, "I love you," without shame, she could not do it. She had fallen in love with him, and she wanted their baby, even if she had to raise it alone. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, white and cold, casting long reflections on the tile floors of the small neighborhood supermarket. Nora stood behind the checkout counter, wearing a green apron that smelled faintly of onions. Her back ached. Her ankles swelled inside her flat shoes. The last customer had just left, and she was ready to turn off the lights, count her drawer, and walk the long 3 miles back to her duplex. Her belly was round now, full and low. Her steps had slowed, and her dreams of glamour, wealth, and success had vanished months ago. They had slipped through her fingers like smoke. All that mattered now was the child she carried. She glanced at the clock above the door. 9:56 p.m. Then she heard the voices. A group entered, laughing, loud, the kind of rowdy energy that brought trouble. The sound of bottles clinking together, drunken laughter, perfume and cologne that mixed into something sour. She looked up, tired, and already dreading the cleanup. And there he was.
Nori-iku.
He was wearing a long black coat, dark slacks, and sunglasses tucked into the neckline of his shirt. On each arm, a tall blonde woman clung to him. They were drunk, unsteady, and giggling. One held a small clutch purse. The other dragged a bottle of sake across the counter. Then Nori saw her. He dropped the second bottle. It shattered against the tile. "You'll have to pay for that," Nora said flatly. Nori turned his head. His eyes locked onto hers. "Nora," he said softly, as if her name hurt to say. One of the blondes looked between them. "Who is this?" she slurred. "Nori, who is this woman?" He pulled away from both of them. "Go," he said, suddenly serious. He looked to Hiro, who had been leaning against the end cap near the cooler. "Take them. I need to see to her." Hiro raised an eyebrow. "Is that Nora James?" "Yes," Nori said, never taking his eyes off her. "Did you hook up that night?" Hiro asked. "It was more than one night." "Just take the girls," Nori added, shaking his head. "I need to talk to her." Hiro looked at Nora again, then leaned in. "You need to do something, man. She looks like she's gonna explode. The boss is gonna blow a gasket if you don't come back." "I can't worry about that right now." Nori turned back toward her. He knelt and picked up the larger shards of glass, his fingers careful and bare. She watched him silently. He was inches from her. Then she slapped him. It echoed through the aisle, clean and sharp. He stood without a word, walked out, and waited by his car, parked just outside under the humming lights. She finished her shift in silence. She walked out alone. Her belly was heavy. The night air was thick. He opened the passenger door. "Let me drive you." "No," she said, without slowing. "I can walk." He didn't argue. He drove slowly behind her. 2 miles. She never looked back. When she reached her duplex, she unlocked the door without glancing at him. He stepped forward. She turned and slammed the door in his face. He did not knock again. He stayed on the doorstep. All night. Then through the next day. Then the next night. By the third morning, she opened the door. His eyes were bloodshot. His beard had grown in rough patches. He looked thinner. "I need to pee," he said, with the smallest, tired smile. She blinked. "Where have you been going?" "Gas station," he replied. "But they're closed." She stepped aside. He entered. She watched him walk to the bathroom. When he came back, she was still standing in the kitchen, arms crossed over the swell of her belly. He walked to her slowly, then, without a word, pulled her into his arms. She resisted for 1 second. Then it melted. He kissed her. It tasted like plum wine and dust. He kissed her until her knees weakened. "I still love you," he whispered. She pulled back, breathless. "Why did you leave me?" "I have done enough damage. I needed to protect you." She scoffed. "Protect me from what?" She placed her hands on her hips. He stepped away, rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm a criminal, Nora," he said. "My boss is a human trafficker. That is why I was at the party." He was looking for. He stopped. Was he looking for merchandise? Nori was crushed. It was true, and he knew it. He should have paid for her then and sent her home, but he wanted her. When his boss called him in, he claimed that he did not know where she went. "You traffic women?" Nori sat down, palmed his face, then he told her everything. About the cars, the girls, the borders. About the money, the silence, the fear. She listened, standing completely still. "I never knew what it meant," he said. "Until I met you. Until I saw them trying to take you. Until I realized I was helping them take girls just like you." She placed a hand on her belly. "I'm carrying your baby." "I know," he said. "That's why I can't go back." The next morning, he was gone again. She wasn't surprised this time. 2 days later, he returned. His eye was swollen and purple. His arm was in a sling. He no longer had a car. He had taken a bus. He looked tired and bruised, but clean. "I left the life," he said. She looked at him without speaking. He didn't ask to come in, but she let him. Nora quit her job at the supermarket the next week. Nori began working at the shipyard down by the water. It was hard work, but he never complained. He came home each night smelling of salt and steel. He slept beside her, always careful of her belly. They went to appointments, bought a crib, painted the small back room pale green. And when the baby came, he was perfect. They named him Takao, which means noble and prosperous, after Nori's great-grandfather. Nori held him with trembling hands. Nora cried softly, her head resting on Nori's shoulder. Their child. Their beginning. The small duplex stood 2 miles from the edge of the shipyard, tucked behind a rusting fence and a garden of wild herbs. Inside, with no car, Nori walked to work each day. He paid the bills and then saved all the rest for the future. They needed to leave California. He had left the crime life, but he still owed a tremendous debt. The afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, casting golden stripes across the floor where Takao sat cross-legged, building towers out of wooden blocks. He had Nori's sharp eyes and Nora's dark, glowing skin. His hair curled tightly, bouncing as he moved, humming to himself. Nori sat on the floor beside him, carefully helping him balance a narrow block on top of the pile. "Steady," he said. Takao stuck out his tongue and focused. "Like this." "Perfect," Nori said. The tower fell. They both laughed. For 3 years, this had been their joy. Nori worked at the docks, came home with sore arms and grease under his nails, and spent every free moment with his son. He adored Takao with the full force of a man trying to redeem his own childhood. Nora watched them sometimes from the kitchen, heart full and aching. Her love for Nori had only grown, deeper and quieter, more rooted in who he had become, not who he had been. But the past, it seemed, never left quietly. Mateo returned to the U.S. He arrived in a black car that rolled silently through the Pacific Heights neighborhood, windows tinted, engine low. The man was older now, but time had not softened him. His pale skin, too smooth for his age, had the look of plastic pulled too tight. His eyes were cold. His smile had not changed. He had come for what he believed he owned, plus interest. He stopped in front of the home of Joel. Matt's thugs made their way up the stairs, breaking down the door. Mateo entered. Joel didn't bother to check to see what happened. He ran to his library and opened his safe, pulling out everything, money, deeds, and jewels. Mateo had paid Joel Davis 4 years ago for a girl named Nora James. He had not received what he paid for. He left, humiliated, but he was back for retribution. He took what he was owed, plus interest. Joel lay entangled in his famous rose garden. It was his pride and joy. It was also the place where it ended. Nori received a message came through Hiro, who had tried to stay out of it. A whisper about foreign money, about something old boiling back up. Nori had not been back to that world. But they had found him anyway. Joel Davis was gone, and it wasn't pretty. Nori packed a bag quickly. He handed Nora a bag containing everything he had left from his time in the underworld. $327,000 in cash. He kissed Takao's forehead, whispered something only the boy would remember later. Then he turned to Nora. "I have to go. You need to go back east." Her hands trembled. "Take us with you," she pleaded. "If they find me," he shook his head and palmed his face. "I should have taken you away from here long ago. Now, there is no time. Take the money, take Takao, and go back to Boston. I will distract them to give you time to escape. Don't leave us. If I stay, they will find you. Both of you. This way, you have a chance to survive." Nora looked shocked. Then she grabbed his shoulders and she cried into his chest. He didn't cry. He couldn't. He left that night. Nora contacted her landlord. She paid for the next month. She arranged to move her things to storage. She did not understand the urgency, and before she finished packing, they came for Nori. It started with a knock at the door that wasn't a knock. It was a thud, heavy and sure. 3 men entered before she could even scream. Mateo was with them. He smiled. "You cost me quite a bit of money, Miss James." She stepped in front of Takao, who clung to her leg. "You are not taking my child." "Oh," he said, laughing softly, "but he is not just yours, is he?" Takao screamed as two men lunged forward. Nora fought hard. She scratched and kicked. One man hit her. Another dragged her back into the kitchen. Mateo followed. I have money, take it. She pleaded. You want to pay me, he said. Fine. Double. Triple. I don't care. But you're going to understand what it means to cheat a man like me. I was never yours. Joel had no right to sell me, she screamed. She fought again. But they held up her son, and she fell to her knees. Take a pound of flesh, he said, staring at the thugs. Nora heard Takao crying from the next room. He became hoarse, then it was just a whimper. The thugs covered her mouth to muffle her screams. He gave her one last kick, and he left. Mateo walked out. He looked down at the child. He was too young to be useful. They left her in the kitchen, injured and alone, but alive. Mateo wanted Nora to regret her actions for the rest of her life. He went outside and returned to his hotel. Nora had given them the bag of money. It wasn't enough. They wanted her pain, and they took the bag containing $227,000. 2 days later, he met the thugs at an abandoned warehouse. He eliminated the evidence of his misdeeds, then Mateo returned to Italy alone. When the neighbors found Takao on the porch, whimpering, they called the police. He had torn a hole through the screen door and crawled through it. Nora was conscious on her kitchen floor but shaking. The left side of her face would never be the same. She was beaten and bruised. The worst damage could not be seen. In the hospital, Takao sat in her friend Cressida's lap. Nora never told the full story. Not to the police. Not to the hospital. The hospital had called her parents. Her father said she got what she deserved. From that day forward, she wore an eye patch. She walked with a limp. Her beauty was gone, her face disfigured. People stared at her on the street. Her remaining eye seemed deeper now and darker. Her face was no longer symmetrical. They had taken strategically. No amount of surgery would restore the loss. Nora's voice was lower, slower, like something that had burned had healed over unevenly. But her son loved her more. He did not care about her scars. He held her and whispered, "You're so pretty, Mommy." Nora smiled through cracked lips, but she never recovered from that weekend. But she lived, and that mattered to Takao. The trees stood tall and endless, their tips clawing into the gray sky. A fog rolled over the earth like breath, softening the world in every direction. Norihiko parked his car at a rest stop off Route 542, not far from the entrance to Mount Baker National Forest. His windshield was cracked, the passenger window taped with plastic. The engine had been choking for hours. Seattle had been a dead end, not a haven. Nori called his brother, Nance, but he had not returned his call. He left a message saying only one thing. I need help. Not for me. For my family. But no one responded. He had to move on. Norihiko sat behind the wheel, hands gripping the steering wheel tightly, jaw clenched. He could feel it. He had seen them in the rearview mirror, two dark sedans, too clean, too familiar. California plates. He didn't wait. He opened the door and ran. His shoes were cheap. His coat was too thin. But he knew how to move uphill, how to breathe in the thin air, how to take the path that looked impossible. He and Nora had hiked these kinds of trails before, with Takao in a pack on his back. They hiked small ones through wooded parks, stone trails in Half Moon Bay, dirt paths that twisted into nothing. Nori pressed forward, faster and higher. But he hadn't counted on their weapons. He felt a searing pain in his thigh. His leg went limp. His body crumpled. The world spun. He rolled once, then again. He slid down the slope of a ravine, his arm bent at the wrong angle beneath him. It took the men another 30 minutes to reach the top. When they peered over the ridge, they saw him lying still, a dark shape below among the brush and ice. One of them spat on the ground. He's dead, he said. Let's go, his partner replied. They didn't have the skills to climb down to retrieve him, nor the time. So, they left. In Oakland, the TV played low in the background of Nora's duplex apartment. The local news anchor mentioned the name Joel Davis during a brief report. He had been found in his rose garden, his body bruised, one hand missing. No suspects were identified, but foreign involvement was suspected. Nora didn't flinch. She didn't even look up from her plate. Takao sat beside her at the table, dipping carrots into ketchup. "Who's he, Mama?" he asked. "No one," she said softly. "Just no one." There was a knock at the door. Nora tensed. It was Cressida. She hadn't aged well, and she still wore too much perfume and too many rings. Her eyes scanned Nora's living room, then narrowed as they landed on her. "I heard about what happened," Cressida said. "You've been through it, girl. I was gonna say we had a place for you out near Las Vegas. Clean work. Upscale clientele. But..." She trailed off. She couldn't look Nora in the face. Nora nodded. "I wouldn't do well with customers, would I?" Cressida didn't answer. She reached into her purse and pulled out 2 $20 bills. She left them on the counter and left without saying goodbye. 2 weeks later, another knock came. It was Nori's friend, Hiro. He looked different, older, more tired. He still had the quiet grace of someone used to watching people from shadows. He didn't try to hug her. "I heard," he said simply. "Davis. You. All of it." She nodded once. "I'm not going to lie," Hiro said. "Nori was like a brother to me." He placed a small envelope on her kitchen counter. Inside was $1,000 in cash. "I run a massage place. Downtown. Real money, no pressure. The girls keep most of what they make. It's not glamorous, but it's clean and legit." Nora didn't answer. "You know what the business is. But you also know what rent is like out here." He stepped toward the door. "You don't have to decide now. Just think about it." She did. The next day, she went to see him. The mirror in the bathroom was still cracked from the last time she punched it. Her face had not healed well. The doctors said they did what they could. Her left cheekbone was sunken. Her lips had healed unevenly. Her right eye was damaged beyond repair. Her back still ached where the knife had gone in. She didn't recognize herself anymore. But she had a child to feed, and she needed money. She was tired of trying to be beautiful. Nora showed up the next week. She didn't wear makeup. She didn't lie about her name. Hiro looked her over once, nodded, and handed her a robe. There was no fanfare. Just another room. Another key. Another folded towel. She went to work. Not because she wanted to. Because she had to. The sky was deep violet when Norihiko rolled onto his side. The ridge above him was empty, the men long gone. His breath came shallow, his chest burning with each movement. Pain seared through his left arm, and when he tried to move it, the limb hung limp and swollen. Broken, he thought. Useless. He closed his eyes for a moment. If he went to a hospital, it would be over. Someone would call it in, someone would know he was not dead. And then they would come again. So he lay still in the dirt and pine needles, gathering strength. When he finally pushed himself upright, he gritted his teeth so hard he thought they might crack. The slope above him loomed like a wall. He began the climb, one-handed, his legs trembling beneath him. Each movement was a battle. The climb took hours. By the time he reached the top of the ridge, his vision blurred with sweat and exhaustion. The night was gone when he stumbled back onto the trail. It was morning now. Hikers scattered the paths, families and couples laughing, snapping pictures, carrying water bottles and packs. Whenever he heard footsteps or voices, he slid off the trail, pressing his body into the brush, his broken arm throbbing. His face and jacket were streaked with dirt and blood, but no one stopped him. It took the entire day to return to the rest area. When he saw the car, he almost wept. The back window was shattered. Glass glittered across the seat. His go bag was gone. Everything. Cash, burner phone, clean clothes. Gone. He still had the keys. He still had his wallet. There was maybe $200 in cash folded into it. Nothing else. Nori unlocked the trunk and pulled out the sleeping bag he had left behind. That night, he didn't drive. He curled up in the woods just past the rest stop, wrapped himself in nylon and silence. He stared up through the trees at a slice of starlight, his mind circling the same thought. It had been the best night of his life. The night he met Nora. The way she had fought beside him. The way she had kissed him. The way she had let him in, not just into her bed, but into her heart. And Takao. His son. His boy with his sharp eyes and her skin. They were the best thing that had ever happened to him. It would have been better if he had left them alone. On the third day, a state patrol car slowed as it passed his wrecked sedan. The trooper leaned out the window, taking notes. Norihiko, crouched low in the woods, knew what it meant. The plates would be logged, flagged, and maybe his car would be towed. It was time to move. He slung the sleeping bag over his shoulder, clutching his broken arm to his chest, and walked east. Away from the mountains, away from Seattle, away from the border he could never cross now. Mateo's men would expect him to try for Canada. He would flee to the Northwest states instead, Idaho, Montana, or Wyoming. These states had miles of land where people were few and roads were empty. These were the places men could vanish, and he planned to vanish. Back in California, Nora never meant to start smoking. At first, she just picked up the habit because the younger girls at the parlor smoked. Because the long nights at the spa left her restless, because the silence in her broken heart was too loud. Nora saved what she could. She studied at night, at first alone with borrowed books, then in small classes. Numbers comforted her. They were steady, exact, never cruel. They didn't laugh at her scars. Hiro had gone upscale. He remodeled the spa with clean marble floors and soft golden lights. He raised the prices, hired professional massage therapists, and trained his girls to smile and speak gently to the customers. The police left him alone, and the business looked and felt legitimate. Nora hated mirrors. It wasn't her age that made her flinch. It was the scars. The knife had left more than jagged lines on her skin. It had damaged her eye, leaving it dull and unblinking, the socket sunken. She could hide the scars with makeup and sleeves, but the eye betrayed her. Men noticed. Children stared. She never stopped feeling exposed. For 5 years, she smoked, each cigarette masking her nerves, each cough a reminder of how much she had given up. But one morning, she looked at Takao, his young face turned toward her, watching, absorbing. She put the pack down and never picked it up again. It was not easy, but she did it for him. She worked at Hiro's new spa for 5 more years, doing his bookkeeping. Nora eventually found a job with a convenience store. The pay was better, the work cleaner, and she could breathe easier without the weight of shame on her shoulders. It was steady enough to support Takao as he grew, enough to give her days with less fear. Eventually, she applied for a position as an accounting clerk with the state. Accounting. A real job with real insurance. She got it. The first thing she did with the new insurance was replace the damaged eye. The prosthetic was glassy and artificial, but it gave her back symmetry. She could look at someone without feeling the weight of their stare sliding into that broken place. For the first time in years, she felt almost whole. She began to speak softly about plastic surgery, maybe, if she could save enough. She wanted her son to see her face as it once was, or close to it. But that was when the sickness came. The cough grew deeper. The doctor told her the damage was permanent. Takao sat beside her at every appointment, his hand wrapped around hers. Through it all, he was her joy. But the cough rattled through her chest like loose change in a tin can. It never really left her. Her doctor had written COPD in her file. The word made her skin prickle. She could not climb stairs anymore. Walking across the lobby to the elevator left her breathless. Even simple things like cooking and washing dishes left her ribs aching. Takao was a preteen. He did more than his share to help around the house. He was tall now, his legs lean, his smile quick and shy. He looked more and more like Nori with each passing year, so much so that sometimes it made her chest ache to look at him. Hiro had once joked he could be his father's shadow. She didn't laugh. But Takao was sweet. He was kind. She had raised him to be a gentleman, the way his father had been with her. He carried groceries without being asked. He opened doors for her. He read aloud when she coughed too hard to finish a page herself. Every night, before he went to bed, he kissed her forehead and said, "Good night, Mom." She lived for that. One evening, when Takao was 12, Hiro came to her home. He entered and sat down. It was the same house, only different. Gone were the colorful walls, elaborate artwork, and hip furnishings. She had replaced it all with simple and sedate furnishings. Hiro sat at the table. She placed a glass of green tea on the table, a remnant from her life with Nori. He nodded and drank it. When he finished, he sat quietly, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "There's word," he said. Nora looked up. "About Nori?" Hiro nodded slowly. "They say Mateo's men caught him near the Canadian border. It was years ago. Nobody's seen him since." Her breath caught, and the cough rose again, tearing through her ribs. She pressed a hand to her chest until it passed. Her eyes watered, but she would not let the cough spill. She forced herself to nod. "Thank you for telling me." She did not tell Takao. She could not. Every night, she still held out hope that he had survived. That he had found a way, the way he always did. She carried that hope in silence. The duplex was too quiet when Takao came home from school one afternoon. He found his mother on the couch, her chest rising unevenly. Her lips were blue, her breath rattling. He ran to her side, shook her arm, begged her to answer. When she could not, he pounded on the neighbor's door. They got her to the hospital. She lasted 3 days. He sat by her bed the whole time, his hand in hers, whispering every memory he could think of, every story he knew, anything to keep her tethered. But her eyes closed more each hour, her hand grew cold, and finally, she was gone. Takao was 13, and he was alone. He tried to make it work. He went back to the duplex. He watered the garden she had planted, pulled fruit from the trees, and boiled rice when there was still gas left in the stove. He found work for a little while, stocking shelves at a market. But he was too young, too thin, and the boss's wife accused him of being illegal. He wasn't, but it didn't matter. He was fired. When the lights were cut, he burned candles. When the water shut off, he carried buckets from a neighbor's spigot. He dug in trash cans for scraps when the food ran out. That was when someone called. One night, desperate, he opened the closet where his mother had kept a box labeled emergency. Inside was a faded passport with his 6-year-old face staring back. He remembered the day the photo was taken, his mother fixing his collar, telling him to smile big. There was also a worn photograph of his parents holding him as a baby, both of them smiling, both of them whole. At the bottom of the box was an envelope with $1,000. He stared at it for a long time. They had been broke so often, scraping for rent, skipping meals, and yet she had hidden this away. A safety net he never knew existed. Then he found the letter. It was written in English, in neat strokes. It was from someone named Nance, his father's brother. The letter was brief. It mentioned that Nori had reached out and left a message. Nance had sent contact information in return. Takao folded the letter and slipped it into his backpack. He stuffed the money, the photos, and the passport inside. The last thing on the box was a hand-drawn map. He looked at it briefly, then folded it up and put it back in the backpack. From that night on, the backpack never left his sight. He even hung it from the towel rack when he showered. 2 weeks later, the knock came. It was Child Protective Services. A neighbor had seen him digging through trash cans. They asked him questions. They held him. He refused to speak much, clutching the backpack like it was his own skin. It took time. But eventually, they reached Nance. 2 weeks later, Nance flew into San Francisco. Takao stood at the airport with a caseworker beside him, his backpack straps digging into his shoulders. When Nance appeared, Takao froze. The man was tall, with the same dark eyes as his father's photo. His skin was tanned from years in the sun, his voice low and accented. He stopped in his tracks when he saw the boy. "It is like looking at him again," Nance said softly. Takao swallowed hard. He felt his throat tighten. Nance hugged him without asking. They left the next day. Japan was bright, loud, and crowded. The air smelled different. The food was different. The language pressed down on him like a wall. Takao hated it. He hated the stairs. He hated the strange streets. He hated being ripped from the little life he had known, even if it had been hard. Most of all, he hated that his father wasn't in Japan. He had held to a fantasy that his father had returned to Japan, and he was alive and safe there. Takao eventually found a safe space in Japan. It was on the soccer field. The soccer pitch was slick with rain. Takao's cleats cut into the wet turf as he sprinted forward, the ball at his feet. He dribbled past one defender, then another, his chest heaving. The shot curved wide. Again. The coach clapped once, sharp. Focus, Takao. Takao bent forward, hands on his knees, his breath coming in ragged bursts. He hated the way the rain plastered his curls against his forehead. He hated the stares from the sideline, the girls whispering, laughing into their hands. Too dark, one said in Japanese, not even attempting to whisper. He is not really one of us. Takao had heard it all before. At 13. At 14. At 15. He was 17 now, but it still stung. On the field, he was fast, stronger than most, but off it, he was invisible. Or worse, unwanted. He wanted out. Every night, he lay in his narrow bed and thought of the United States. His mother's home in Boston, the place she had once described with warmth, even when her voice cracked with regret. He wanted to breathe the air she had breathed, to walk the streets where she had grown up. He wanted to be more than the boy with the wrong skin. When he told his Uncle Nance, his uncle listened without blinking. You want to be American, Nance said. Then you will go. But not just anywhere. I have a friend in Virginia. He recommended that you should go to Hampton Bay Naval College. A good school. A strong school. They will teach you discipline. Takao frowned. My grades aren't good enough. Nance leaned back in his leather chair. The Matsumoto crest, the same one stamped on phones across Asia, gleamed on the wall behind him. Grades can be fixed. I will make sure of it. Matsumoto Industries had built its fortune on technology, sleek, glossy mobile phones. Everywhere Takao went, there were billboards in Tokyo, glowing posters in Shibuya Station, advertisements on the side of buses. The world knew his family name, but Takao felt none of it belonged to him. It was money, power, and reputation, but none of them mattered to him. Hampton Bay was different. From the moment he stepped onto the campus, his backpack tight against his shoulders, he saw faces that looked like his. They were black, brown, tan, freckled, mixed. There were cadets and students from all over the world, their accents curling into one another, their laughter rolling across the quad. For the first time, he did not feel like an outsider. He felt like kin. Takao spotted Chance during his second week on campus. He was an older student, tall, sharp-eyed, his accent thick with French. He leaned against the library railing, watching Takao scowl over a math textbook. You look like you want to throw that book through the window, Chance said. Takao smirked. Maybe I do. Then let's keep the glass intact, Chance replied, sliding into the seat across from him. Takao didn't know it then, but Chance would become like a brother to him. Chance began to work through the problems with him, patient, careful. When Takao grew frustrated, Chance leaned back and told him about his own family. He was born in Martinique. He left the island to escape familial expectations. The words struck something in Takao. His mother's grandfather had been from Haiti. The rhythm of French blood, the history of survival, the feeling of never fully belonging, it was a thread between them. For the first time in years, Takao let someone in. Chance graduated and joined the Navy, but they reconnected at the Norfolk base. Takao wrote to Nance still. Letters, short but steady. His uncle replied every time. But in Hampton Bay, Takao began to realize something. Family was not only blood. They were the teammates who passed him the ball without hesitation, and the cadets who nodded to him in the hall like he belonged there. It was Chance, sitting across the library table, pushing him through equations he thought impossible. Takao had come carrying his mother's photograph, his father's absence, and the weight of both of their tragedies. But here, in this place by the sea, he was not just their son. He was himself, and for the first time, that felt like enough. This ends our story. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share this story, and subscribe to our channel. Also, be sure to stop by for more stories each week. You can find Hampton Bay books at online book retailers. For more information about the Hampton Bay books, visit denisenicholsbooks.com.